Eve, great to be with you. Thank you for coming over.
Thank you for having me.
Let's dive in. So for starters, what is the Bad Yogi Society all about?
It's sort of just this little, I guess, secret club that you don't really have to do anything for or show up to at all, that helps me to make the yoga that I like to teach more accessible to people that are a little bit put off by yoga in the sense that they feel they need to be a certain way or do a certain thing to be able to practice, whereas it's my belief that yoga can be accessible to almost anyone, if not everyone. So I started out trying to be a really good yogi.
Yeah.
And I just kept getting in trouble. I have a little bit of foot and mouth disease.
Can you describe a couple instances?
Yeah, well, the sort of way that Bad Yogi Society came about is my absolute best friend and one of my greatest yoga teachers. You might know her, Wendy, from Yoga Works. Mm-hmm. I was going to a course with her and Patrick Beach, who also is a huge influence for me. But I'd had recently a bulging disc in my neck. Prior to that, I'd been in a few different car accidents and had different injuries and that sort of thing. And I hadn't met Wendy yet, but I'd asked her if a refund was possible or to transfer over to a different course or something because I couldn't do handstands and headstands and that kind of thing. And she kind of had some stuff going on personally and a few people pull out of the course already. I didn't know that at all. And she basically said, no, too bad, so sad. And by the way, your lying and your injuries are from a car accident years ago and they're not current and they're not real, and basically called me a bad yogi because I wasn't telling the truth. And I tend to have a little bit of a short fuse with that kind of behaviour. So I called her out and I said, yeah, well, who made you the authority on what's good and bad and what is and isn't yoga? And we sort of left it at that. And it was really funny. We were having this argument via a Facebook Messenger conversation, and we were both in the car park outside my yoga studio that I had at the time called On Power Yoga. And she didn't know that was my studio. I didn't know I was talking to her. And I walked in there all disgruntled and opened my studio and took a breath and just put it aside. And this beautiful, striking woman walked in and she came up to the desk and she said, I'd like to just do a drop-in class. And I said, yeah, cool. Have you got any injuries I need to know about? She said, I do, from head to toe, but I am a yoga teacher. And I said, great. Where do you teach? And she said, Yoga Works. And I sort of was like, okay, what's your name? And she goes, Wendy. And I was like, Wendy. It appears we've been having a conversation in the car park. And anyway, then I was like, you know what, you can have this class on the house. So she did my class, and I had only just come out of a teacher training, and I thought to myself, okay, teach the most perfect yoga class that you can, with all of the drishti and the breath and the bandha. And, I didn't miss a beat. It was the most present class to this day that I think I've ever taught. And she sort of came up to me afterwards and said, that was a really beautiful class, so thank you. And left. The next day she sent me a message and said, I don't like the way that we've left this. Can we meet up for coffee? And I normally can be a bit stubborn. And I said, I didn't really want to. My housemate was like, just do it. Give it a go. See what she has to say. So I went to coffee. Coffee turned into wine, and wine turned into dinner, and we became best friends from that day forward. But she definitely came in guns blazing, and I really put my hot head and my pride aside and listened to what she had to say. And then I said, she said, when you called me out on not being the authority and what's good and bad and what's yoga, I turned to my husband in bed and said, you know what, she's right. And I thought that's really funny because when she called me a bad yogi, I thought, you know what, she's right.
Did she literally call you Bad Yogi?
Yeah, she did. She denies it, but she did. And then later, like thinking about the beautiful friendship that we've had, from then on, she never gave me my refund, but she did give me free yoga, forever until this day. Now I teach for her at her studio. And she... I was thinking about it the other day, and I thought about something that a teacher said to me once. He said that conflict is just two people coming together and saying, hey, this is how I need to be loved, and you're not doing that. And you have the choice then to meet that and learn how each other needs to be loved, or you have the choice to turn away. And I think that was the first time in my life that I stepped up and said, okay, cool, how do you need to be loved, Wendy?
Beautiful.
Yeah, and since then I got a little bit of a reputation for being a bad yogi because I'm a bit sassy and I'm a bit, opinionated, or not opinionated, but I challenge people's beliefs and people's opinions and my own beliefs and opinions, and I kind of like it. So then I thought, yeah, I'm going to be a person that says, yeah, if you're bad or naughty, or you think you are, then you can still do yoga. I
like it too, and I do love how you have challenged the kind of insta-famous pursuit of a lot of yoga teachers, the image, the squeaky clean, always positive, always perfect attempt, image. And you've challenged that, and I think you've done it beautifully. I think you do it consciously, and I really appreciate it, which is one of the main reasons I want to chat with you and just express my appreciation for that. I think it's needed, not especially, but kind of especially with the younger teachers, where that seems like the thing to do, to become the most successful, like, quote-unquote, best yoga teacher, you got to be on that cover of Yoga Journal, and to be on the cover of Yoga Journal, you got to look the part, and it drives people fucking mad. Yeah. Like, that pursuit, that attempt to always be positive, to always look shiny, perfect, is driving people fucking mad, but people can get away with it for like a year or maybe two if they're really resilient, but that suppression of our kind of scallywag nature or our kind of inevitable negativity, it's just a part of nature. To be negative is just a part of the ebbs and flows of nature, and that attempt to suppress it. And I've succumbed to that as well. I've fallen victim to that as well, and I burnt out. I got smashed, I got depressed, I got anxious, I got fatigued, and it was a real fierce awakening, you could say, that it just doesn't work. So I really appreciate your honesty and your kind of cheeky scallywag way of communicating it. I don't think it's too in your face, just enough. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Yeah, it's funny. I do. Social media is actually a big part of how yoga has evolved. In spite of the resistance it brings up in a lot of, like seasoned yoga teachers, and I do turn up the scallywag a little bit. Like, I think most people think that I spend a lot of my time just being a rat bag, but I do spend a lot of my time just sitting at home and being a good yogi, but but that's not the club leader's role on social media. But,
so you feel a responsibility to look bad.
I feel a responsibility to encourage people to not push away their shadow. I think, in fact, my first proclamation of the Bad Yogi Society was, take your shadow and grab it by the waist and kiss and hug it, and it's as much a part of you as your light side, and we all have this beautiful yin and yang and this balance, which is really, it's the way of the Tao, basically. So, it is, really something I feel passionate about, especially not looking the part. When I started out, I'm a millennial as well. When I started out teaching, I put so much pressure on myself. I didn't really even feel that pressure from anyone else, but I just put it so much on myself. And, you know, my friends will tell me like, oh, you were no fun Eve, because I just, you know, thought I only had to eat green leaves and seeds, and I just wanted to be so thin and beautiful and do all the poses. And I injured myself. You know, my body doesn't do those things naturally. I don't have, even after years of practice, I'm not the most flexible. I'm not the strongest. So, you know, and I got really wrapped up in trying to be a certain way, and I did get adrenal fatigue. I literally burnt out, and I just thought, wow, like I'm sick to death of this when I could just be myself. And the turnaround point for me was my sadhana, my practice was wake up in the morning and do Nauli and pranayama and meditation and practice for an hour, and then, you know, do what did I used to do? Drink salt water and shelter and do all these cleansing practices, and then try to be present the whole day. And I just put all this pressure on myself. And then I was speaking to another teacher, and he said to me, oh, you know, that just sounds like a lot of things that you have to do in order to be a yogi, or in order to believe myself as a yogi. And he said, why don't you try this? Instead of doing any of that, just wake up and remember that you are divine. And I was like, oh, yeah, cool. That sounds way easier. And I have it next to my bed, written on my bedside table. The first thing I see when I wake up, it says, you are divine. You're a miracle. And then the rest is gravy.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The rest is gravy. That being said, I definitely do appreciate all the morning practices you just described. Like,
yeah,
I love the feeling I feel when I've done my breath practices, or I've done like oil pulling or the salt water. Like I let it go for quite a while. To be fully honest, I let it go for about a year, just getting caught up in parenting and just the busyness of life. And then I've just kind of brought back a lot of those cleansing practices, and I just feel so much better, so much lighter. I feel a deeper connection to that divinity. That's the thing. Like, waking up, we are divine, of course we are, but a lot of the accumulated just stuff, toxicity and that kind of, it does accumulate, and it can really cloud, similar to like just dirt accumulating on a windshield. It can be hard to see it and feel it. That's what I feel directly in my experience. If I let a lot of those practices go for too long, it's like I can't see it as easily. Yeah. So I've definitely found a newfound appreciation for a lot of those practices, but it's a joy. Like I look back to when I also took it way too seriously and took myself too seriously and was trying too hard. And it wasn't a joy. I just felt I ought to do it because I'm a yogi. And I think that's a really big shift from like, you ought to do it, like feeling obliged and like almost like guilty for not, which is pretty common, to then just doing these things for the joy of it, which is what it feels like for me now. A lot of these cleansing practices and austerities and that, like it feels good on my nervous system and like a joy, like playing almost, you know.
Yeah, that totally resonates with me. I came full circle and do these practices now, not religiously or out of obligation, but I wake up in the morning and I feel way more connected to myself than I ever have lately, and I'm just like, what do I need? You know, what I want to do, what brings me joy. And I find that I'm just doing the same things, except it's out of love, and it feels natural rather than something that feels like a list that I have to get through in order to be accepted by myself, you know.
It's a huge leap, and it's a beautiful full circle to come back around, because I think I remember when it really hit home for me, like what we're talking about, the kind of uptight yogi. There was a yogi I really, really admired in India, that at the ashram I would regularly go to, and I still do when I can, and just seemed like your typical austere aesthetic yogi, just super, super skinny in deep, deep meditation in the corner of the room, and just looked the part just fully. And this was about 10 years at the peak of the kind of that phase of just like, wow, that's a real yogi. But then I would hear him in the kind of in the ashram yard just talking, and it was really shitty conversations. Like, he'd be beating himself up that he didn't practice the way he wanted to practice. And it was a big wake-up call for me of like, oh, fuck, he's not at all what I was perceiving him to be. Like, holy shit, like, he's really uptight, he's really neurotic, he's like beating himself up. And I thought he was like the pinnacle of what a yogi is. And that was a big wake-up call for me of like, okay, so he's practicing that deep and like looks the part. But he, like, by his conversations I keep hearing, he seems like the most neurotic person I've ever met.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that.
And I get it. Like, I've been there as well. But that I recall as being a very pivotal moment. I just chill. It doesn't have to be so full on.
Yeah.
And I think yogis can be some of the most neurotic people in the world. And I remember Richard Freeman also speaking to that. Like, the yoga practice is perfect for your kind of type A perfectionist. I remember him talking about that. That rings home as well, because there's no end to the things you can perfect. And like, that can be done in a beautiful way, but it can drive the neurotic like just to deeper and deeper levels of neuroses.
Yeah, absolutely. I am just reminded of when I first became a yoga teacher, and I thought, oh yeah, great, I'm going to go out there and like meet all these amazing other yoga teachers that are just, you know, so good and perfect in every way. And I met them all, and I was like, you guys are just as crazy as me.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
And I actually was quite disillusioned with it, because I had put myself under all this pressure to be something and to fit into this image, and then had all these experiences with people who are now dear friends of mine, just thinking that they were this person. You know, I had them on a pedestal, and then I got to know them, and I was like, wow, you guys are inherently flawed like the rest of us. And I kind of think that's really beautiful. And it always reminds me of a story. I think it's a story between about Shiva and Shakti, how, you know, Shiva sits on the mountain and meditates, and, you know, doesn't want much to do with the earth, but he comes down to visit Shakti, and she's just so happy being in the human experience, and she just wants to feel pain, and she wants to feel beauty, and she wants to feel love and loss and grief and all of these amazing human things. And I think that a lot of us get caught up, from my own experience, a lot of us get caught up in seeking this higher level of whatever consciousness, and reject these earthly beautiful things that we're experiencing. And now I see, you know, all these things as the Bad Yogi Society sort of embraces as really beautiful and important, and it definitely makes me appreciate the things that I definitely tried to avoid, which was sadness and grief and loss. And yeah, my yoga personal practice has come completely around in circles over and over again, with my relationship to those kinds of experiences and topics.
Beautiful. So. Yeah, it's a classic experience of the yogi, of the seeker, of all the world traditions of getting, you could say, obsessed with transcendence and the Shiva awareness, pure awareness, and bypassing all the human complexity. And it's understandable, like, from that standpoint, from that particular belief that, okay, relationships are distracting, the senses are distracting, the world is very distracting. Let's create an environment where we're as the least amount of distraction as possible, the least amount of triggers as possible, and I'll just sit in pure awareness. Like, that's the classic path of the yogi, of the the renunciate. And I think it's being revealed, the issues of that. For example, like what Ram Dass speaks about, like the horny celibate, like the yogi, the priest, the swami, or whatever it may be, that has sworn celibacy way too prematurely. And they're denying their sexuality, denying sexuality, denying sexuality. You can get away with it for a little while. But then eventually, if it's been suppressed for long enough, not dealt with long enough, it leaks out in fucking horrific ways. And that's what we're seeing right now. I think that's helping people as well get a more grounded perspective of spirituality, is all these quote-unquote masters getting called out on sexual abuse, and these priests, like one after the other, getting called out on just horrific cases of sexual abuse. So I mean, it's also having the effect of having people just go, fuck this spiritual trip and fuck this like religious trip, and like not have any spiritual practice at all, because what's the point? Because it's all like, look at these masters, they're not masters at all. Yet I think it is having this shake-up effect in which we'll gradually come full circle into what you're describing, the Tao, the flow, that Shiva-Shakti balance, which I see happening.
Yeah, that, that makes me think that, we just put so much pressure on ourselves for everything, and even the path of the renunciate and everything. It's so much pressure to deny these human, animalistic things. And I think that, yes, that's a right path for some people, but there are so many paths up the mountain. It's what's right for you. And the, what was I going to say? Something about the denying of things and taking things away. Like we're labeling things as good and bad and necessary and not necessary, and that's a big part of all these pressures. But that's just the mind, and the mind is talking, the mind is thinking, the mind is labeling. And like a rose is not a rose. A rose is like, it just is what it is. It's just being this energy and this essence of divinity, and it's just there. But we look at it and our mind goes rose, it labels it, and then it takes us out of the experience of the rose. And that's the same with every single thing. We're walking around this world going, okay, that's good, that's bad, this thought is good, this thought is bad, where we could just declare like thinking and then just come back to presence, and that's a big practice for me, just being like, okay, like, not even stop to smell the roses, just stop. Just absolutely stop and just be, rather than do and label and think and put all these compartmentalized beliefs in order, and yeah, I would say that's my main practice at the moment. It's just trying to be still and present and feel the essence of nature and things without labeling and adding sentiments and good and bad and pressure.
It's a beautiful practice, and it's timeless. I mean, that's the apparent end goal of all the nonsensical compartmentalizing that we do, is to get to that state of being, just being. And the mind is so complex, and I think it is helpful to have maps and methods and stuff like that, but what we tend to do is mistake the map for the territory. We get obsessed with our particular club, our particular method, and then we, with our tribal kind of ways, our kind of egoic tribal ways, we tend to identify with that club, and then every other method, every other club, every other map is wrong. And that's been going on in different religions for so long, but it creeps into the yoga world big time. Absolutely. Big time. And it's just nonsense. And that's why I love chatting like this, long form, with people from all kinds of different disciplines. The older senior teachers that have their perspective, the people in the middle, and then the younger teachers as well, and there are younger teachers coming through, like fresh out of teacher trainings, that I think could really do with some of this just sharing of, like, because I hear it again and again from really young teachers of, admitting, especially in the retreats and the longer workshops where we have like sharing circles, people, the younger teachers often admit that they've been trying to be spiritual, trying to fit into the club, this spiritual materialistic club that is just like trying to fit into any other club, and it's just not necessary. So I really do hope that even just a few younger teachers listening can relax into that phase, because it's a beautiful phase of learning and treading the waters and getting to know your groove in your way of sharing, and not trying to fit in with a particular perceived model, because guaranteed that teacher we're putting up on the pedestal that we perceive to be perfect, they've got their shit as well, guaranteed. Guaranteed. And that's one thing I love about my main teacher, Ramdas, is he's also, even though he's one of the most senior teachers out there and a guru to many, I think what's been really beautiful about his teachings is his honesty, his transparency about his humanness. Still to this day, just fully honest about his neuroses and that he eats chicken, and like just joking about it, because it's very helpful, So yeah, I think we should keep speaking to that context of the younger teacher, because it can be agonizing. Yeah. And if they can somehow avoid that burnout that you experienced, that I experienced during that phase of trying, it'll help that transition into really blossoming into how they're going to teach, how they're going to offer,
Yeah, absolutely. And the more that I go on, the more I appreciate honesty and authenticity over everything. And I don't mean authenticity like, a certified authenticity. I mean authenticity as in, who are you? What do you have to teach me? And I just have so many things I want to say to younger teachers, being one of them as well, but the ones that are just fresh out of the training, about being yourself and not trying to fit into a cookie cutter mold, because every single person on this planet has something to teach each other, and like everyone has their own experience and wisdom, and it's so important to know that you have something to offer. I got a lot of flack. Like when I first graduated my teacher training, I bought a studio that day. Like I opened on Power Yoga that day, and oh my goodness, the backlash that I got. I got emails, I got, grapevine talked about, and I have this like natural ability to not be affected by that, luckily. And I always have. I think it's more like a goldfish. Like I just forget that people have said it. But
that's a good skill.
But I just I had so many people just say, "Oh, you shouldn't. Like you're not ready." Even my teachers, my own teachers that I looked up to, who were saying the week before in teacher training, "Oh, you can do anything. You can be anyone. You're amazing." And I was like, "Yeah, cool. I believe you." And then I went and opened my studio, and they're like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that," And I just went, for my teacher training, for example, I got sick for the Perth training. I got dengue fever, and I missed it, and I was devastated. And I thought, okay, I want to do this with the same school. Where is it running next in the next month? And it was Sydney, and I scrambled together all my life savings, and I worked full time as well as a chef, and I flew to Sydney every weekend over 3 months to go to this training, because nothing was going to stop me from becoming a yoga teacher, and nothing anyone's ever said to me was going to stop me from sharing my experience of the world and teaching what I have to teach. And still to this day, people are like, "Oh, you're young, you don't really know anything, you're not a real teacher." Like I get this every day. I got this last week in a yoga retreat I was on with my teacher who's taught me for 3 years. Still just, you're not a real teacher, you're not you're experienced enough, your practice isn't great, you're juvenile. I get this every day basically, and I just say, well, my students beg to differ, and I teach from the heart, and nothing, like it's a dharmic thing, nothing is ever going to stop me from teaching yoga. And also I think that my mantras that keep me going in times where I'm getting this feedback is like a teacher is someone that helps explain things. That's all I'm doing. I'm helping to explain things. I would definitely not call myself a guru ever in my whole life. I'm just someone who's helping explain things because I understand them to my best understanding. And the other one is that I have something to share and I want to share it. So that's it. Yeah.
Totally. Thank you for sharing. That's beautiful sharing, and it's vulnerable and I think helpful as well, and super inspiring. And it's kind of a shock to hear that you get flack that regularly.
Yeah, it's
that
just
surprises me quite a bit. Just kind of reflecting on that for a moment to really speak to that from my heart, because I feel like the yoga thing has been interesting in the modernization of it, and I see where people are coming from that projection. At the same time, I think people should be also careful in that projection as well. Like, I think everything works itself out. Like, if teachers have jumped into being a teacher prematurely, so to speak, like, they'll feel it in their gut. Like, no, shit, I'm just not meant to be a teacher. That's fine. And even if they weren't, the teacher training would have been of benefit anyway, a deep immersion and huge learnings. And it kind of has a course of working itself out. You obviously feel a deep, dynamic pulse to teach what you're teaching, and that is beautiful. And to be able to persevere even with people projecting their belief onto you that you shouldn't be a teacher. I mean, I bow to that. Good on you, huh?
Thank you.
And I see a lot of the teacher trainings out now not preparing teachers. That's what I'm seeing. Not preparing teachers adequately. And even that naturally has a way of working itself out. People learn as they go. They grow as they experience criticism like you were experiencing. That's going to be a part of your growth. It is. It's turning you into the bad yogi you are, and it's helping you speak to a particular student, and it's building up this kind of beautiful resilience. So that's really cool to observe. A lot of younger teachers I've met have actually admitted, like, fuck, I just did this teacher training and like spent all my money, but I don't feel I've learned anywhere near enough, anywhere. So I think that's good to admit as well, but often younger teachers are surprised, like, fuck, like, just spent all this money and put all this time in, but all they talked about was anatomy, but I wanted to know, like, the philosophy. Like, so I do think there is room for just all sides of the discussion, like debate on, like, because we've got this Yoga Alliance thing, but that's not doing shit in terms of like regulating what's a good quality teacher training. And teacher trainings are a lucrative business choice. So a lot of people are creating teacher trainings that just aren't comprehensive to prepare people to be a teacher. So I definitely do see that, just a reoccurring predicament from young teachers. Like, fuck, like, I'm not ready, and shit, I don't have enough money to go and do another teacher training. So that's an interesting one. And when I compare it, not to compare, but to compare it, with other, like, practices of becoming a teacher, like martial arts, for example. Like, the amount of hours students have to put into, like, become a teacher, like, it's just so long. 10,000 hours plus. I think with the yoga thing, we've gradually decreased the amount of, like, what's required to become a teacher. And so it's just interesting. And that'll work itself out through conversations and all that kind of thing. And people do their own continued learning, and we learn as we go. But I am seeing that, just in observation.
Yeah, I actually, like, I just want to talk a little bit to the self-doubt and the beliefs. That's just another one of the things that I really am an advocate for, which is, work out why you believe that you don't know enough and you're not enough, because there's trainers who are young, who've been practicing longer than I have, who have, the same amount of training that I have, who still don't believe that they're enough. And I'm like, that's when it gets to that point, then it's nothing to do with the yoga teaching. Yeah. It's to do with how you feel about yourself. And that's a big part of my training that I got, which was just have a look at why you think you're not enough, and I did, and I found a way to sort of balance that in myself and step up in front of people and put myself out of the way, because it's not about you, it's about the teaching. And if you've practiced enough, and if you've not practiced enough, but if you've practiced and if you've listened and been present to your own teachers, you have something to share, and that's what you've taken from it. And everyone has something inside them, so that's good enough. I would happily go to a young teacher, and if I learned something just based on something that they did that day, some insight that they had, I'm happier than if I learned, a crazy new pose or like something about the philosophy that I, may have already skimmed over. You know what I mean? Like, I'm interested to hear your perspective on everything in the world. Like, I don't really care if you can recite the Patanjali Yoga Sutras to me. So again, it's that putting the pressure on yourself. But also, I would love my next move. I have been inspired by listening to all the episodes of your podcast and hearing these stories about these young teachers that aren't confident. I would love to say, firstly, find someone who's willing to mentor you.
True.
And secondly, I'd love to see more teachers, and myself included, create like a bridging the gap, between your teacher training and actually teaching, and being like, yeah, cool. Let's help you. Let's guide you gently, rather than just slam you with all this information like a teacher training, and see what's holding you back. That would be really cool, like a coach, like a mentor or coach program for people that really want it. I was hungry to teach, and I started teaching that first day I stepped off a plane, walked into my own studio, and I was like, downward facing dog. And I'm sure it was clumsy, but I still have a student from that day. His name's Marcus, and he's a doctor, and he's just been with me from day one until now, and he's amazing. But yeah, and the other thing as well, on the opposite side with beliefs too, is if you are a more senior teacher, and you're saying, there's too many yoga teachers being pumped out, and all these teacher trainings aren't enough, and these juvenile yoga teachers think they can just come teach, and all I hear in that is resistance, and resistance is really exciting, especially if you're willing to become aware of it, because it's an opportunity to challenge your beliefs, because that's just a belief that you have. And to me, that sounds like fear. It sounds like fear and scarcity and feeling like you are becoming obsolete, or that you're going to fade out and that yoga is going to change, and when in reality everything is evolving and changing the way it is. And some of the things, it doesn't really, it's not ideal. Social media is a big part of yoga now. That's the way it is. Accept it, love it, move on, and I just think we're here to understand things, and to understand things, we first must accept things, and to accept things, we first must forgive things. So if you can just find this love, acceptance, forgiveness, and understanding of everything and one another, then maybe we can just sort of, it does feel like there's a bit of a war between the old teachers and the new teachers, especially in Perth, but maybe we can just help each other raise the consciousness of people. There's, there are a lot of yoga teachers, but there are a lot of people that don't know or don't practice as well. And the more yoga teachers we are, the more allies we have to reach people that could benefit from this incredible practice. I know I have changed so much from yoga. I owe yoga my life. So the more people we can touch by our individual appeal to others. There are senior teachers here in Perth that I would never go to, because I don't want to be bored, but it's like, that's just me. Like, I like fun stuff. I like the acrobatics, and I like, hip hop music. I practice at the hip hop yoga studio. Like, I love it. So everything's sacred. Everyone is sacred. Everything is divine. And I think if you can find that beauty and divinity in everything that's happening, then there's less resistance. And yeah, it's a practice of liberation. You can liberate yourself from all these beliefs that hold you back. Because all those people saying that stuff to me, like, it definitely isn't affecting me as long as it will be affecting them, because that is a firm opinion that they have of all new teachers, And I was like, yeah, cool, I'll take on your feedback, but there's nothing I can do because I've only been here 3 years teaching.
Yeah, I mean, you might be doing this in what you're experiencing, but to like zoom out and see it from their feared perspective, like it would take the pressure off even more to go, right, fuck, they were one of the first yoga studios in Perth, and it was a certain way, and then all of a sudden, yeah, yoga studios popping up left, right, and center. Like, from that vantage point, it'd be like, fuck, like all this competition, and I see that big time in LA. Like, I've been chatting with Brian Kest, and like, he had one of the first yoga studios there, and it was just flourishing, and then all of a sudden there's just studios everywhere, and it's been challenging. So like, from that vantage point of just survival, like trying to pay rent and get through it, and that kind of sympathetic fight or flight reaction and the fear you spoke of, in a certain way of observing it, it's kind of understandable. It's not conscious, it's not cool, but from like that reactivity of like, fuck, like I had it down, and then all of a sudden this young juicy energy popping up and it's changing the game. Like, from that vantage point, it's kind of understandable. So like, there'd be a deep practice while someone's like ridiculing you to go to like see it from their perspective. Be a deep fucking practice to see it from that vantage point and have compassion, like in the moment, which you might be doing. And you might be doing that. It sounds like you're doing something similar to that.
Oh, yeah. And like, I mean, I get it. Like, my studio wasn't successful and it closed down, and it was a hard lesson to learn. But outside of that, I was so lucky enough to have my own studio teaching 20 classes a week for the last 3.5 years. I have more experience than so many people could have ever dreamed of, and really got to develop my own style. So I'm like, I see it. I see it from all perspectives, and I just think, like, conflict with compassion, and without expectation is something that is really important. And to have a conversation with one another rather than about one another is going to be something that helps to bridge that gap. My studio wasn't successful, and I burnt out pretty hardcore, but I work for the competition now. Like, I remember Yoga Lab opened in Fremantle, and I just thought that I was just devastated, because I just knew that my studio wasn't going to succeed. And now I work there, and it's fantastic, and I'm learning more than I've ever learned. And it, everything always works out, and it works itself out, as you were saying. So, like, I just think the lessons that I've learned over the past couple of years has been to meet the resistance in me, and then, like, let it go, and then know that everyone's just doing the same, like, resisting and then letting it go, and then we're just peeling back these layers, and we're all growing, and it's messy and it's beautiful, and it is what it is. It's just being and doing and having and human. So yeah.
Beautiful. Let's talk a bit more about the Bad Yogi ways. Someone going, fuck yeah, that sounds like my kind of practice. What is the Bad Yogi sadhana? Have you come up with a kind of Or is it the pathless path? There's no actual map. You just be bad and do whatever you want.
I think the bad, well, if you want to be bad, that's cool. I think the Bad Yogi Society is radical inclusion.
Yes.
It is radical self-acceptance and self-love, and being able to stand in what you are doing with confidence, but also not firmly, because everything is quite fluid, and that's a big belief that I have. And I try to share through my posts, which is like, be you, but also know that you're not you. You're just this manifestation of the divine that's got all these layers. So, and love and accept yourself, even if that means that you're, eating steak and drinking wine and smoking weed or whatever you want to do that's considered naughty. Don't feel guilty or shame. Like, embrace your vices and your shadows until you are ready to let go of them, if you ever are. One of my teachers said to me recently, we're all here to reach self-realization and enlightenment, but you can crawl, you can walk, or you can run. He didn't tell me you should run. You can crawl there. Like, if that means it takes a few lifetimes, that's cool too. Like, it is what it is, but try to just take the pressure off being perfect and embrace your perfect imperfections.
Totally. And a lot of actual realized teachers, masters, will admit samsara is nirvana or samsara is samadhi. It's all enlightenment. It's all it. It's only from the vantage point of our limited perspective and our ego, and then the spiritual ego, or whatever we want to call it, where we have a certain ideal of what enlightenment is, this unattainable perfection. Yet the guru of my lineage, Ram Dass's teacher Maharaji, he was a scallywag like no other. He was swearing all the time and really tested people's locked-in perspectives of what an enlightened saint is to be like. And he was a scallywag and throwing fruit at his students and just sloppy, kind of sloppy in his ways. From the stories I hear, I never met him. He passed some time ago, but and he would be pointing to it's all Christ, it's all divine. It all is divine, yet it's so tricky from the limited perspective and the old doctrines of religion and the spiritual paths that have done a good job in convincing us collectively otherwise. It's so easy to buy into the notion that no, it's when I'm walking on water and just constantly positive and just in a constant state of love and bliss, this unattainable constant. Yet an inevitable part of form is the fluctuations, like you keep speaking of, the shadows and the badness and the negativity. It's a natural part of Shakti. So here's Shakti just doing its thing.
Yeah.
Just doing its thing. And then, here is Shiva, just immaculate, clear awareness, which is a part of the experience as well, and it's accessible. But a part of the human experience, is the messiness of it all. And another teacher that I love dearly, Lama Surya Das, he talks a lot about his phase of what he calls Lama Serious Das, in which, he was teaching from that old perspective, but it's still very much a part of our current day. But it's the old belief system of the perfect yogi, the good yogi. He speaks a lot about that, and he's become Lama Surya Das, much more relaxed, and he calls it slopping to enlightenment. Just slop your way to enlightenment. There's no rush,
I really like that.
He's a great teacher. I don't know if you've dove into his work yet, but
not
he's
yet,
wonderful.
but I will. Yeah, I'm reminded of of a book that I read. I think it was called The End of Your World. I can't remember who the author was, but he's someone that has reached enlightenment in our.
Is that Adyashanti or?
I can't remember. I think he just had like a regular name.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But yeah, he there's a scene in the end of his book as he's talking about self-realization and that it's it's not the most enjoyable path to get there, in the sense that we know enjoyment to be. And the end scene, or not the end scene, one of the scenes in the end is he's at a wedding and he's looking over to these people, his friends, who are laughing and carrying on and drinking wine and having a great time, and he's overcome with this sense of nostalgia and also a sense of knowing that even if he wanted to go back there, he couldn't, and I'm like, yeah, cool, why rush to the top? You can enjoy the journey on the way. And I can't remember anything more from that book other than that one scene.
End of Your World.
The End of Your World.
I'm going to write that down and Google it after.
It's really cool. It's a different perspective on enlightenment. And I just think it's important to do what feels right for you, as long as you're not doing wrong by anybody else.
I agree with all of that. I do see a place for the yogic austerity, like to also be honest with places where we're addicted unconsciously. So like the social media thing, once again, it's beautiful and it can be used beautifully. It's like a great tool that can be used to create beauty and to share beauty and to share honestly, but it can, like any tool, can be used really toxically as well. And so I do see a place for the disciplines of yogic austerity. Like if something has become compulsive and addictive and we know it's not actually of any good, to apply that yogic austerity, which can often, with the more tantric, indulgent methods, often doesn't get played into the equation. What do you think about that, Amy?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that it's important for me to share with the Bad Yogi Society that I want to reach people that feel like they're not, yogically inclined and aren't disciplined and everything like that, because what happened for me in my personal journey was that I had this real aversion to all of this yoga stuff, but I just knew how good yoga made me feel and the practices, and eventually I came around to becoming disciplined and austere, and I do still have a glass of wine, or, like I'm a bit silly and a bit of a scallywag sometimes, but, I never feel more present than when I'm cracking up laughing as well, so I just think it's important to find this balance for my personal practice. But what I see a lot of, especially in my students and the feedback they give me, is they love me and they come to me at the start and they say, oh, you're just not like all the other yoga teachers. Which actually used to really affect me at the start, because I was so wrapped up in trying to be like that. A lot of them just said, oh, you don't look like a yoga teacher. And I was like, yeah, I know. But, they, and then eventually they're, practicing with such discipline, and they're doing, practicing advanced asana, and they're curious about meditation, and they're curious about philosophy. And the best example I have of this in my own teaching is when I opened my studio, I also started working for Kay Waterhouse at Vital Beat Yoga, which is the hip hop yoga studio, because I just thought that is really cool. Like everything's sacred, and the way that her studio has evolved and the way that my teaching and the students have evolved in that studio is incredible, because out of all of the places that I teach and all the very serious places that I teach, that one is the one that is the most bhakti, that uses the most mantra, that uses the most mudra, that has the most teachings of Vedanta and from the Bhagavad Gita. And I they don't even know that they're practicing advanced asana either. They think they're practicing slow hatha, which I have no training in at all. So I've been teaching them advanced vinyasa pretty much from the start, but very slowly. And they think that they're not spiritual, and they think that they're not doing anything spiritual, but they're the most present, incredible students that I have. And I'm like, yeah, it's because they're curious and they're committed. And it's been basically the same, at least the same 10 students every week for the whole 2 to 3 years that I've been teaching there, which I've never had in any other studio before. So I think there's like this, however you can, as a teacher, reach somebody, and however you are approachable by somebody and relatable to somebody, eventually I think they will become curious about the more traditional practices and teachings, which I'm very interested in, and my own personal practice is very spiritual and quite religious as well. Like, I'm a big Gita fan, and I love mantra especially, and all of those practices that I had such resistance to in the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, that's really refreshing and interesting to hear. I think one of the biggest traps of the spiritual seeker yoga practitioner is when they do identify with being very skilled at the practice. When one identifies with being a guru, when they're like calling themselves a guru, that raises big red flags for starters. When one kind of puts themselves on a pedestal, like I'm the one, like that's pretty common. Like, kind of like the spiritual version of like an egomaniac. Really, it's really common, and it's a huge trap, and it sucks people in. You know, it feels very very seductive, and it creates even more divide, which is just bizarre. Like, it's almost ironic, like identifying with being like the one. Yeah. No one else is the one. Like, it's a funny little trap.
Absolutely, and I'm the first person in the crowd to roll my eyes at that. You know, I'm the first person to go, yeah, that's righto. I'm out here, and I think that's a big part of the Bad Yogi Society thing too. Is you know, I mean, we could call it discernment, or we could call it impatience on my part, because I've never had the time of day for that sort of megalomania. And it's, you know, I mean, like, I've been on teacher trainings and on retreats and things where I've had the leader be that way inclined, and I've been the one to push the envelope a little bit with that, because I don't really have a mouth filter, but and I get in trouble. But, you know, then I'm like, well, I'm the Bad Yogi. Maybe that's what I'm here to do, is help people become aware of their beliefs and the way that they're appearing and coming across. Because I think a lot of, you know, students can be really afraid to say that they disagree, because they don't know whether they're learning something that's true or not. But I just got to say, nothing's true. Like, we don't know what's true. And
for so long, you pretty much couldn't disobey the master. Like, you get fucked up.
Yeah,
quite
absolutely.
Literally. So it's very new for the student to actually be able to even give constructive feedback or negative feedback or talk, or it's very new.
Yeah.
For so long, it's been like, no, you just believe the word of the priest, of the master, of the teacher, and that's it. So it's definitely a new cohesion, a new relationship is blossoming. That, again, is very new for the more senior teachers, like which are used to, like, no, you just obey my word, and like, that is it. Just obey my word, be good, and see you next class. You know, yet what's bubbling is a deeper honesty and a deeper relationship, transparency.
Yeah. There is no one person and no one truth. And I even I got to say, like on this retreat that I just came off with one of my absolute favorite people and teachers in the whole world, we actually had a big sort of conversation about this exact sort of megalomania and the fact that it was very much a one-sided discussion of yoga with people, and I sort of, in the heat of the moment, said to him, look, you know, you've got 2 ears and 1 mouth. If you listen twice as much as you talk, then you might be open to learning something yourself. And he definitely did not like that. But I think it's true. I think, just open your ears and listen more than you speak, you know, if you are in a position of power, because I think I've just said it before, every single person has something to share and something to teach us.
It's beautiful, and I think it's a great place to gradually wrap things up. Is there anything you want to share? Any further notes you want to share? Any upcoming events or anything you want to share, or even just your platforms that you want to share, like where people can connect with you?
All I have going on is at Bad Yogi Society, and I've got nothing to offer except just teaching yoga. And I teach at Yoga Lab in Fremantle. I teach at Yoga Works. I teach at Vital Beat, at Power Living. And just Ocean Yoga Flow. I teach everywhere just because I just want to teach and I just want to share. And I've got nothing more than just that to offer.
Beautiful. Well, I love your work, Eve. Really great to connect.
Stu.
Thank you for sharing so honestly, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me and having me on here.
Welcome. Great to chat.
Thank you.
Much love.